Mormon doctrine has a commandment that's called the word of wisdom, and it is pretty much the members abstaining from any sort of beverage or food that will stimulate the body. So of course that's tobacco, that's even caffeine. In fact, it's kind of comical. I talk in my play about my grandparents. They secretly were smuggling Diet Coke into their fridge, and I was a young child, and when I saw my grandma buying that Coca-Cola, I really thought that my grandmother was a drug user. And so of course you have this skewed sense of reality of what really is living in this very puritanical, upbringing, and so rigid. I think the reality of really what is an addiction and this information of even of sexuality and being educated on drugs is there's not a lot of resources or even education out there. I came out to my parents and all my family, and I would say coming out as a gay man in Mormon society is really committing social suicide.
How old were you at the time?
I was older. In fact, it was in my late teens I began coming out to my friends and family. I was too much of a coward to come out to my parents in person, so I wrote them a heartbreaking coming out letter, and they, I don't think, could face that reality. Is they actually replied back with a 2-page type letter of telling me that they were repulsed by me, that they did not support me. My father even shared with me that my uncle was gay, which I had no idea, and actually died of AIDS, and threatened that I would die the same way. And so of course there comes from their part a lot of uneducation and fear, and with that, they're just pushing that towards me. And I still have the letters today, and I when I reread those, it brings back all those emotions and that heartache. And I just remember the end of those letters signed after saying, we don't support you, we don't love you in that capacity, you're repulsive to us, you're gonna die of AIDS, and then they signed it, love my parents. I read those under my bed, and to kind of revert back to being a child. I mean, I was a 19-year-old young adult, and reverting back to being a child. And I just remember at the end, I just sobbing and just telling them, I just remember sobbing, just saying, fuck you. I remember this intense anger, and just started building up. And for the rest of my life, the relationship with my parents was very hands-off. I didn't want them in my life. I pushed my family away. And what should have been my support group became almost my enemies. I carried these same addictions from my childhood, such as my drinking habits, my drug habits, and when I didn't have a lot of money. And so as soon as I became an adult and had a career and profession, I had access to more drugs, more alcohol, and more temptation for addiction because of my age, and also just because I had the finances. Started with drinking. It began, that wasn't enough. I didn't get enough stimulation. It's amazing how one addiction will lead to the other. And so then I began using harder drugs. Marijuana, not hard enough. It became cocaine, acid, I mean, the list goes on and on. As a gay man, I do have to admit there's a sense in our culture, or there's a part in our culture where there is a sense of wanting to be liberated and to be free. There's a bit of a revolution within the LGBT community where we do have these big parties, and we like to go out and we want to feel free. So then drugs weren't enough, and then I began finding that my job and my profession offered me the ability to buy what I would like, and I began shopping. And before I knew it, I had this shopping addiction where I found this instant stimulation from going to the mall and dropping thousands of dollars. Before you knew it, my own career and my salary couldn't finance all these addictions, and I began stealing from my employer. And I was well liked from my employer, and with this came trust at a high up position. And after doing the math, I ended up stealing $70,000 from my employer to fuel my addictions. The one thing I think with being an addict is you are an incredibly selfish person. You don't care about your loved ones. You don't care about anyone else but yourself. And not only that, all you care about is getting high and feeding that addiction. I mean, your mind has complete control over your addiction, and it's no longer even a choice if you want to have this stimulation, if you want to drink, if you want to take a sniff of cocaine. When I embezzled $70,000, I didn't care about my employer. I didn't care of who it would affect. I didn't even care that it eventually would affect me and that I would be caught, that I would be convicted as a felon, that I would be humiliated in front of my community, that I would be on the evening news. I didn't care. I didn't care how my family or my partners would be affected by these addictions. It was just solely about me and getting that stimulation and high. It didn't take long that, of course, any employer would find out that they're missing about $70,000. I had a knock on my door, and it was the SWAT team, the sheriff's department. They were at my door with a search and seize warrant, ready to take any incriminating evidence. I remember sitting there on my couch, and everything started moving into slow motion, and I'm holding that warrant in my hand, and it was just shaking, and my heart is pounding, and seeing my whole life just being exposed. I sent my parents a text when I knew I was going to jail, when all of this, waiting for that arrest warrant, and I remember sending my parents a text saying, I need to talk to you about something really, really, really big. And having that conversation with my parents about that, the crimes that I committed, the addictions I was struggling with, and that this all came to this crashing halt. My parents definitely 10 years later reacted much differently than my coming out, and they could sense that their son was in serious need and serious trouble. And I talked to my parents for the first time that I was struggling with these addictions, and that I was using drugs and alcohol, and that it started when I was 13, and I even talked to him about this rape. And so it was this very cathartic experience, being able to be really authentic with my parents. Not long after that, I was incarcerated, I was convicted, I went to prison. Of course, there was first this feeling of denial, that I'd convinced myself that I had not done anything wrong, that even the crimes and the addictions I had didn't even exist. And I couldn't seek help, or I couldn't help myself until I came to that, I found that answer myself, or I came to that conclusion that I needed help. The turning point, or the lowest moment in my life, a lot of addicts talk about their rock bottom moment. I hit rock bottom when I was, I remember very clearly sitting in a jail cell detoxing. I remember all I wanted was a gin and tonic, and I had this intense headache. I was sweating profusely. I mean, I had the shakes. I mean, I was detoxing from cocaine, detoxing from alcohol, and I remember detoxing just going just like a little infant, sucking on my thumb even, rolling back and forth, and just having this intense purging of all these toxins, and just coming to this realization that I am in a very low point. I'm a grown man. I'm nearing a 30-year-old mark in my life, and to be at this low point where I'm detoxing in jail cell was a very huge turning point in my life.